We are live, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Charlotte Short-Term Rental Insiders. We're going to be talking about how long it actually takes to run a short-term rental business, essentially doing it yourself. So, Riley, welcome. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm glad to bring it back together to touch base with some of our followers here in this group, some FaceTime and talk about something that some of our more experienced hosts will know a little bit more about, and some people who are looking to get into the industry are not going to know as much about. So I think it's going to shed some light to kind of both groups and kind of really bring an important topic to light and educate some people and give some reminders to some others.
Yeah, no, when Riley and I were prepping for this, it was really alarming. We were breaking down literally what we do on a daily basis with managing, and then also we'll go into onboarding a new property as well. It was pretty alarming the amount of time that we're spending on this thing, which is awesome. But also at the same time, I was like, oh, this is going to be so much value for people kind of on the outside looking in, wondering exactly what it'll take to start up an Airbnb or a short-term rental, the ongoing management and maintenance, the pricing adjustment, literally all that kind of goes into running a successful Airbnb business. So, and I think that's all why we're here, is to really learn and dissect and help each other out and, really just provide value. So that's what Riley and I are going to do here today. Once again, we are going to be talking about how long it takes to really run a short-term rental, aka Airbnb. So without further ado, I am going to share my screen. We created a really good breakdown of literally everything you would need to know. And this is essentially it at a super, super high level. So how it's really broken down is upfront cost and then ongoing cost. So the upfront cost is like furnishing, essentially onboarding a property. That's kind of broken down into here. We'll go into detail here for sure, but that's kind of the two buckets from what we see. And then the ongoing bucket is essentially how much time per week you should be allotting to this to make sure your Airbnb and your short-term rental is performing at its highest peak.
Yep.
So upfront cost, boom, it's essentially 15 to 20 hours of one time. So this is an upfront. This is not ongoing. This is going to be essentially how long it takes you from starting to finishing the onboarding and setup. So we've kind of broke it down into two buckets, more of like a systems, like setting up your PMS, and then kind of more of a property, like setting up the supplies, getting the photos done, all that really goes into setting it actually up at the property. So Riley, kind of talk me through what you see here at a super high level, what kind of value people would need to know.
On the system side, things are pretty consistent, we'll say, especially for us. I mean, we've got a system for onboarding properties to all the different softwares that we use, all the tools that make up the processes that we use internally. So that stays pretty consistent per property, but the physical kind of on location tasks that you have to do, that 10 to 15 hours, that really does range a lot. It's difficult to put a number on exactly how long it's going to take. Obviously, you have to look at the condition of the property, the size of the property, which really helps kind of determine what all you have to do. I mean, we're talking about things like furnishing the property. So even if you're doing this yourself, you have that additional task of furnishing these rentals. So us as a property manager, we take over the property once it's furnished. So we're not even including the time that it takes to order all the furniture, to get it set up and put together, to arrange it into place. And that is a significant investment in time in itself. So furnishing the property is a big time investment. Ordering the supplies and getting everything set up in the property and arranged and even labeled in certain situations is another big time investment. And then you have to all our tasks that you budget an hour or two and you end up taking 3 or 4. But setting up the Wi-Fi, getting that set up for your guests, and kind of smoothing the login process for the Wi-Fi, however you guys plan on doing that. And a number of other things like any signage that you use in the property, guidebooks, just setting all that little stuff up, the little touches that kind of make that experience, a 5-star experience, so to speak. So the property bucket can range greatly. If you get a little bit of an older property, obviously there's going to be a significantly larger amount of time that you're going to take getting it ready. I mean, you might have renovations that are even going to preface all of this stuff that we're going to talk about today. So that bucket does change a lot, but it is, more of a bear than the system setup, at least in our experience from our point of view here. The system setup for us, it's basically just adding a property to all of our automation rules, creating the listing, obviously, but syncing that up with the different softwares that you might use. Some to name are a pricing tool like Price Labs or Beyond Pricing, AirDNA if you want to use them for some kind of comp analysis stuff. The listing itself in all the different channels that you use, a channel manager and a PMS, even if you use those as well. So the system side is quite a few different pieces and integrations, but that you can kind of streamline as you get better and better with more and more listings and get it down to just a couple of hours as you see here.
Yeah, the system is one thing that, I mean, in the beginning, if you're just starting out, figuring out the systems is going to be a lot more than 5 hours. If you know somebody, if you follow this group, like we're going to let you know what systems you need, syncing up the calendars, things like that. If you need any help, drop in the comments below. We're more than welcome to kind of help you through that process. But the system itself, once you kind of been there, done that type deal, it's a smooth effort. Make sure you're documenting in a SOP if that's something you're interested in. Setting up essentially like, okay, click this, click this, click this, click this. And then once it's done, once you've been through it a couple of times, that will significantly shrink. But with the property, that's something that you can't really streamline or create a process for. You can, and it will definitely help. But setting up the supplies at one property to the next, that's probably going to be about the same amount of time from property 1 to property 10.
Yep.
So that's kind of the essentially onboarding is what we call it, the setup, the one-time thing. And then the ongoing thing is the other side of the coin that not many people really talk about. They're always like, okay, how long does it take me to get up and running? But one thing that we see in this business a lot is, okay, how many hours per week will actually need to maintain this and make sure the guests are communicated with, make sure the pricing is dialed in, making sure if there's a huge event, you are adjusting your pricing accordingly. And that's kind of this whole topic right here. So we kind of break it down into really 3 high-level buckets: pricing 1, the turnover management 2, and then the guest communication 3. Not in any particular order, but that's one, really the 3 main buckets that we see on an ongoing basis. And at a super, super high level, we're estimating this about 3 to 5 hours per week of ongoing maintenance. And that is per property. I will repeat that: 3 to 5 hours per week per property. So if you have 2 properties, just double these numbers.
And I think it's important to also note that we're speaking in averages here. So obviously you may have weeks where this might be lower, and you're certainly going to have weeks where it's going to be higher. For example, turnovers. The ideal turnover is going to take, a little less than an hour just to make sure that the cleaning is done correctly, the supplies are set out, yada, yada. But you have maintenance that happens, unplanned maintenance on the property. Things break, things need to be reviewed and checked. And it can be significantly higher than your 3 to 5 hours for any given week, especially, the way things end up working out. Sometimes you feel like when it rains, it pours. You've got 2 or 3 maintenance issues that pop up at one time, especially if you're working with multiple properties. So just keep in mind, as we talk about these different buckets here, these are in numbers or in averages. So you can have weeks where you're going to spend double that amount of time, and it's just the nature of the business. You have to make sure that you have the time available to do at minimum the average amount of time per week, but a maximum at least probably 2x that amount of time, just to make sure that when things happen, you have enough time to make sure they're handled. Else you're looking at canceling reservations or not providing that 5-star quality service to your guests.
Yep. No, that's a great point. And just kind of the other side is you're going to have great weeks, and you're going to have no check-ins and no turnovers that you have to manage, and the pricing is dialed in. It's like, oh, okay, this is easy. You're spending maybe an hour a week, but just like Riley said, when it rains, it pours. One thing Riley and I were talking about is I think overall the pricing piece right here is something that not many people talk about. and we actually haven't really talked about it in depth, but that is one thing that I think there's a lot of opportunity people are leaving on the table. I would probably guess most people don't even look at their pricing once they set it. But just kind of our 2 cents, that's one really differentiator we think that we've done, is really dialing in our pricing and for our investors and our properties. But yeah, I mean, this is, it's an ongoing thing. We're constantly, adding to this and tweaking these numbers, but at a super high level, you're looking at some significant time up front, getting your short-term rental up and running, and then definitely some hours per week to keep it running at an optimal level.
Well, I'll jump into these a little bit in more detail, but think about, I know we've looked at some listings together and some videos with this group, but too often do we go to a listing and see flat pricing, the same price for days of the week and weekend days, and out into the future, and hot season and a low season. And obviously, we don't need to go into why that's a problem, but there are tools out here to make it easy. But just plugging into a pricing tool even is not enough work. That pricing tool is basically the ability to benchmark against your market and see how you're doing in your performance in terms of some of the major metrics out there, like your ADR, occupancy, but also the rates that you're setting in the future for any given day, whether that's an event weekend that you may have in your area, or whether that's the low season or high season, or a bunch of other factors. So that's why we really like to emphasize that this pricing is not a set it and forget it tool. It takes an hour or two, at minimum a week, to monitor what you're doing and also monitor what the market's doing. I can give you an example of, if, for example, the demand is significantly higher a few weeks out and most of the supply has already been taken up, that's something that you need to be able to notice and adjust your rates accordingly. That way you're doing the best for your property or for your owner's property, in our sake, to gather the most revenue that you can for the property. So it's not set it and forget it. It's really important that you develop a strategy for how your pricing goes. It's revenue management. And there's a ton of content out there to help you really develop a revenue management strategy, but you need to go through the same things every week, have a list of things that you're going to check, have your dashboards and your screen, so to speak, set up so that you can continue to benchmark against the market and see how you're doing and where you need to tweak the dials or the levers, however you want to refer to it as. So
yep,
that's a really important one, is pricing. We want to make sure that we have, a detailed conversation with you guys on at least the time commitment, the importance of going through that pricing in that way.
yeah. I mean, one thing. I mean, it's October 5th right now. Like, if you do have a property, it's probably already booked out for Halloween. If not, that's a really big travel day. You got to start thinking about Thanksgiving and Christmas as well. Making sure, if you don't have a pricing tool and have all your rules set up, make sure you manually go in there and jack those days up. It's a big, huge travel day. And if you're consistently staying at, let's say, $200 a night across the board, you're missing out on a really, really big opportunity.
Yeah, so let's move to turnover. We hit on it a little bit when we were talking at a high level about the ongoing time commitments and where those buckets are. But a turnover is, again, of the higher time commitments that you're going to spend on your ongoing time to manage your short-term rental. So we average around 2 turnovers a week, and obviously that's going to change significantly based on the size of your property and the market that you're in. A condo that's uptown Charlotte, so to speak, would probably turn significantly more than a single family home, 4 or 5 bedrooms, that's out in the suburbs. So you have to be dialed into what the market is, who your travelers are, and how long they're staying, in order really to more accurately forecast how much time you're going to be spending in a turnover. And also, to circle back to something we mentioned in the beginning, this is your average turnover time. So we say about an hour a turnover. That's a little on the medium to high side. But the reason why it's a little high is because you have those turnovers that take 3 hours. You go to a property and the air conditioning unit's frozen and you've got water dripping onto the floor. I mean, that's something that you can't just leave and, you're gone. So it's those circumstances that you don't plan on that really kind of eat up additional time. So like we said in the beginning, like budget for kind of 2x your time here, because sometimes you'll need it, sometimes you won't. But turnovers is one of those times where it's not as easy to forecast how much time you're going to need. You never know what you're walking into. We've seen a number of different things that some of the turnovers that we have, and most of the time they're good. There's obviously ways to mitigate having bad guests. I think we've talked about that in the past. But sometimes you can do everything that you can, and sometimes it's out of the guest's control as well. If a major appliance in the home breaks, that's not the guest's fault, but it needs to be dealt with. So that's a major time suck, so to speak, is that turnover section. And obviously it varies a ton. So I think you have to also consider the age of your property. So when you talk about issues that happen specifically with the property, obviously an older property with older appliances is going to have some more maintenance issues, and something that's a little bit newer, you can probably budget a little bit less time because you know that those appliances are not nearing the end of their lifespan and probably will have less maintenance issues as you go on.
Yep. And one thing to add to that, if you're not kind of in the games, you're kind of on the sidelines looking in and wanting to get into this business, you might be thinking like, I have a turnover crew. Like, don't they do everything for the turnover? Like, why do I need to spend an hour to 2 a week on a turnover? Like, that's why I have a crew. Definitely not the case. The cleaning crew is only going, it depends on what cleaning crew you use, but they're not property managers. They're there to clean the property and get in and get out. They have hundreds of other properties that they're cleaning for, but that does not encompass everything that is needed at the property. So just kind of a pro tip is check in on the cleaners, making sure that they're doing their job, holding them accountable, and then also making sure the supplies are fully stocked, making sure the pizza cutter's not broke. Multiple things outside of the kind of scope of what a turnover crew is supposed to do.
I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. They're not the property managers. So I'm sure we'll have some people watch this video and think, my turnover crew is great. I've never had issues with them. They do a wonderful job. Well, are they really maintaining the property to the best of its ability? Are they doing the best for that property that it could be done? And there's preventative maintenance that you need to be doing. There are things that a property manager does that are not the responsibility of a turnover crew or a cleaning crew. So that's one big bucket in this thing. And the other is that if you can tell me that your cleaning crew has never missed anything ever, I'll call you a liar or you are a unicorn or something, because it happens and people are human. So if our cleaning crews are watching this video, you guys do a great job. I appreciate you, but people are human and things happen. So having checks and balances in place, make sure that you don't have that guest that checks in and says, hey, the bathroom floor is not cleaned, or there's a big hair across the bottom of the tub, just the little things that humans can miss because, obviously, like I said, people are human and things happen. So putting checks in place just makes sure that you can maintain that 5-star quality with every reservation.
Yep. And then kind of to wrap this thing up, guest communication. That's a really, I would say probably the simplest one on this kind of ongoing spot is communicating with guests, making sure that they're having their questions answered. I think this is a pretty obvious one that most people take into account. We're like, oh, okay, I need to answer guest questions. Every guest is going to have, some guests won't have questions, but some of them definitely will. And, getting to those questions as quickly as possible is going to definitely increase the, obviously the algorithm on these platforms is a big deal. Making sure that you're kind of abiding by Airbnb and VRBO's policy with communicating as quickly as possible. And then, obviously getting the guests the answers that they need to potentially, hopefully book your property.
So I would say this would probably be higher. This is about where we're at. This will probably be higher for anyone else. The reason I say that is because there are a lot of tools at your disposal, which I'm taking a stab here, but I would assume that most small independent operators are not utilizing, and all these automation tools are really going to save you a ton of time here. Communication. So, for example, is communicating entry codes and house rules. That's not something that a person should be spending time doing. That's something that you can easily use the tools at your disposal to shorten the amount of time that you're spending doing this specific task. And plus, you're probably going to do a better job. You have an outline of exactly what's going to be communicated, and put systems in place to make sure that it's done, efficiently and effectively. So the example I can use is door codes. Anybody that's manually generating those and letting the guests know what the code is, or even worse, not changing the code and manually telling them what the code is with every property. I mean, that's a waste of time. And there are too many tools out there that can help you become more effective with your communication, and efficient, even more so, honestly, which need to be used. So I would say, on average per property, I would say we're probably below what a lot of those other operators in Charlotte are at, just because we fully utilize all the tools that are available, and honestly, it helps to do a better job of communication. So about an hour a week might be a little low for where you're at, but if you're looking to do this yourself, just continue to invest into how you can make that process better, and it'll pay off in the end. So pay me now or pay me later. You're either going to spend more time doing the communication every week, or you can spend a few extra hours setting that stuff up and kind of reap the benefits.
Yeah, and use these tools. There's so many tools out there that you can just template out things where it's like, especially with our management software, it's like, hey, guest name, and then just fill in like all the things that they're going to need at your property. Obviously, it's going to vary per property, but you can probably get, I don't know, 75% of the things done in one template, and then tailor that template to other properties, like the check-in codes, where things are at the property, how does parking work, what are the house rules, all those should be definitely templated out. And once you kind of build that template, just build off of it. If somebody has a question that you haven't answered in those messaging, then just add it to the template and then go from there.
Shout out Your Porter, does a great job with their automated communication. I think we've actually posted before what our automated communication rules are at a high level, just to give you an idea of all the ways to make your life simpler, basically. So go check that out. That'll help you guys out a lot and save you a good amount of time. So that's basically it for the buckets there. I mean, I don't want you guys to think that we're overstating this time. I mean, it serves us no purpose to overstate, what's needed. Can you create a listing without doing all these things? Yeah, possibly, but are you doing yourself and the property justice? No, you're not. So, we're being honest with the amount of time that it takes somebody to properly manage a rental. And, if you agree or disagree, let us know. We'll chat about it, and we can kind of talk about what some of the differences are.
Yeah, and this is our perspective, what we've seen with our properties and investors, and what we've done internally to really essentially get the most amount of properties for the least amount of time. I mean, that's really being as efficient as possible. Like that's the goal here. And without efficiency, like making sure that something isn't missed, like that's really the goal here. Is it's not to get a second job or a part-time job. Like nobody wants that. I've talked to plenty of kind of DIYers that are like, oh, like I can, spend an hour a week on this and I'll make an additional $2,000 a month. It's like, okay, like, yes, you probably heard that on a podcast or a YouTube video somewhere, hyping the whole thing up, but like really dive into what is needed, what exactly you're responsible for. And then the second question I always ask is like, how much is your time worth? Like, are you willing to put in, 3 to 5 hours per week per property to manage this? Or is your time better spent doing something else? Like maybe taking up 5 more hours at your day job. Like maybe that's more profitable, and outsourcing this to somebody else, like my Tripify. But I mean, that's really it at a high level. Anything else to add, Riley, before we wrap it up?
Yeah, just the last point you're making. I mean, the risk that you run with self-managing, and there are tons of people out there that do it well. So not against that whatsoever, but the risk that you run is really a risk at your growth. And the reason I say that is because you have a day job likely, and you're cutting out part of that day job in order to manage this rental. And some people can cut out enough time, some people can't. But if you're on the side that can't, then you're negatively affecting the performance of your short-term rental, and therefore significantly affecting your growth over time. If you're not achieving the revenue levels that you should be, then guess what? It's going to take way longer to get your second, your third, your fourth. And this is a lot of self-help readings out there talk about, financial freedom. And this is an avenue for a lot of people to get out of that 9 to 5 grind or that corporate job grind. And you're delaying that by trying to do it yourself when you could be just achieving, the optimal performance from property and focusing on what best in order to feed the machine, generate more money, and then get to that freedom sooner. So it can't be overstated. I know we've said it a good couple times here, but we have a handful of investors that, wholeheartedly buy into this, and they're just, steamrolling through properties left and right. So we've seen both sides. We've seen people who are more hesitant, more hands-on, want to do it themselves, and that's fine. But really evaluate, do you have the time to do it? And is this the best strategy for growth over time? So
Yeah. And
so
I mean,
that's
another,
all I can say.
yeah, no, one more thing to add. I mean, it's like guest communication, are you going to be responding at dinner with your family? Like, is it worth it? And, chances are probably not. But this is open discussion. I'm curious what your thoughts are. If you've watched this far, I appreciate you. We are going to get more into this weekly. We call it a live at 5. We're going to probably shoot for Tuesdays or Thursdays. We're going to be putting a lot more consistent content out there to help this whole community. If you have any questions, drop them in the comment. If you have anybody that's interested in short-term rental property management and getting the most bang for your buck, reach out to us, Riley at mytripofy.com and Caleb at mytripofy.com. Once again, I really, really appreciate your attention, and take care.